Hello, everybody. I see a full house again. That's pretty cool. I don't remember actually seeing like this many people, although I had like bigger classes with more people, but this many people participating at the same time, that's pretty cool, you know. It's a little intimidating too, but it's very cool. Yeah, it's because of the time zone, you know, it's like it's all over the place. We have I would say like most of the people doing my classes are either like from places like Brazil or Italy, you know, it's like lots of Italians. And then obviously other places like Spain, you know, it's like there's a lot of Europeans definitely doing the classes, which is a little hard for you guys to understand, you know, it's like being like early in the morning, sometimes like 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning, you know, so I really appreciate you guys being here, you know, and doing this, taking everything seriously. Um, and I'm going to start by sharing my screen in here. And I want to apologize for yesterday, actually, for rushing at the end. You know, it's like trying to get something done. It's just because uh, although I don't have like a set in stone program, you know, it's like I try to make things like flow, right? Like just like try to have fun with the process. Otherwise, I would not have a reason to do this if I wasn't having fun. Um, I always try to do a little bit of sculpting in the first day, you know, so the next day we can actually progress. And I would feel terrible if I didn't have anything to start today, you know, kind of. So that's why I kind of rush at the end. And I understand that I didn't explain the brushes I was using completely or how I was approaching the forms and things like that. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to explore those things a little bit with more calm now, right? Explore a little bit more how I'm approaching those things, talk a little bit about the likeness approach, camera lenses, things like that, you know. And then I started setting up a little scene we can play and iterate. Um, Probably the first thing you're going to be doing after I talk about those things I just mentioned is going to be exporting the sketch I just did here. So if you approach the same way, for example, you start with a sphere or a cube or whatever you want to start, and you have a sketch, uh, if you're happy enough with a little bit of the proportions of the sketch, which like, you know, I spent probably like another 30 minutes after I closed the class to get to this point here, and then I published the little video. But you know, it's still missing like the cranial mass, and it's still small and things like that. You know, it's like from the top, for example, like it doesn't have mass in here. It's a very common mistake, by the way. You know, is to miss this little egg shape that I have to add more volume in the back of the head. But it's good enough for us to approach, to start with like the proportions, you know. When you work with renders like Arnold, for example, it's very important for you to keep things in the real world in terms of scale, right? Some studios have different pipelines. Sometimes they use like an equivalence kind of system, right? For example, you have for, basically like if you have like 1 meter, some studios use like 1 inch equivalent. So in real world, those models would be like super tiny, right? And then obviously when you're working with like a real world measurements, for example, like for the skin, the depth of the skin and things like that, it's always you have to do this translation kind of thing, conversion, right? You just convert everything. So I rather do everything like in the real world scale. So when you find measurements for anything, right, you can simply apply to your model. If you're gonna find like the size of an eyeball, the information online, or the iris, you can translate like directly. You don't need to translate. You just have to basically like, you know, use those values and you should be good to go. So that's basically what we're going to be doing with this guy here. We're going to use this head, although it's far from, you know, anything completely, you know, proportional or anything, but it's good enough for us to start like a, you know, scaling. You know, it's like probably going to have to go up in scale here and then get to a, you know, to a ballpark, not like precisely, because there's all kinds of differences, right? Like you look at it's interesting. Like I always use this comparison. If you look at the fossil, you know, it's like record, right? Like when it comes to humans and like pre-humans and things like that, you always look at those creatures, right? Like with the tiny skulls, and then some with bigger skulls, and then you look through history. You know, it's like the findings. You know, it's like this tiny little skulls, and then those gigantic skulls and things like that. But you still see those things nowadays, right? Like there are people like with the pituitary gland, you know, some kind of like a you know, damaged pituitary gland, or a tumor that's pressing the pituitary gland in their brain. And then all of a sudden, these people start growing nonstop, right? And you get those giants living today, basically like they have this thing. And then at the same time, you see a pygmy, right? Like a human, based like all the humans around that human are basically the same size and very tiny and everything. So it's like it's this massive, gigantic amount of variation that we have within the human race, right? It's not only the skin pigmentation. It's like it's the thickness of the, you know, it's like the bones, and how compact the pores of the bones are. You know, all kinds of differences, but we are all based like humans, but very different, right? So yeah, we're going to be exploring a little bit of that as well, talking about it. Let's just go back right here to where I was before. Let's get to this. As I mentioned before, in the website, you probably had access yesterday. I published the video, right? Like it's already here. So the first one is here, right? The first lesson was published. I published today the little sketch, like the time lapse from yesterday, just to have as a record in there. And then you're going to notice like those links in here, and you're going to be looking at some of those. The first I'm going to be pointing is this one here. That's the Palomita Mega Reference Archive. If you didn't click on it, you just go to it. She collected, Palomita is this amazing sculptor. She was my student. And every time I say certain person was my student, it's kind of like, it's almost like I'm trying to pretend I was teaching this person anything. But some of the artists doing those classes come completely ready and knowing much more than I do in many aspects, you know. And Palomita is one of those examples of like a hyper-talented, multi-talented person, you know. And she did my class together with her boyfriend, Carlos. And she collected this gigantic amount of reference, like types of skin, close-up and macro photography, like a skin of the hand, you know, all kinds of different eyes, age, teeth, all kinds of stuff. So this is a very cool reference, you know. It's like, so if you didn't click to the link, click, save the file, you know, the link. And if you can also, you know, it's like download everything you can from there. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff you can look at. So I'm probably going to be referring to a lot of those. The other reference is also here. Is the first link is Darren's excellent guide to likeness. That's how I named it. It was an Artstation article that Darren, who was also one of those guys, like my student, but not because, you know, it's like I didn't teach him much. He came ready doing like all this amazing likeness work. And some of the students that subscribe to my class, they just want to get some additional information that they didn't quite get, you know, it's like doing their own work, but not because I know more than they do, you know. It's like, it's just like I have like a different approach, and some people are curious about that, and how I try to keep things very artistic and simple at the same time when it comes like to the way I approach the shader networks and everything. But the complexity comes with the manually sculpting everything, basically. But Darren is an excellent artist, and his likeness tips are pretty spot on. So I recommend you guys to read through this article. He talks about silhouette, right? He talks about you know, the life mask that you can find. One that was very curious, I never thought about, it's using like mugshots, right? Like mugshots, if you have a celebrity, it's more likely the celebrity has a mugshot. You know, all those guys are always in trouble, or DUIs or whatever it is, right? And it's cool because you can get the front view and the side view, right? Then you have like the unusual angles. If you can find, for example, like angles that can solve lots of, you know, parts of the puzzle. To me, likeness is always a puzzle, you know. It's like you assemble as a collection of photographs from different angles, and then you can solve the problem. For example, like you saw the picture I'm using for my own sculpture is just one angle, right? So that means like if I don't have access to other ones, I'm gonna have to make up stuff, and that's gonna, you know, it's like an anatomical knowledge comes handy when you have to do that kind of stuff. But also you can refer to similar individuals, you know, like someone who has like a similar facial structure and skin type or whatever. And then you can actually use those and come up with your own character, right? Which is basically my approach for this class. But in this case here, if you're looking for a reference for an actor, like someone famous, it's always great to have like unusual angles, like the lower view and top view, to solve problems. You know, it's like to basically like fill up those holes that you see when you're trying to sculpt something and you don't have enough reference for a certain area, right? Problematic areas, I would say, like the brow ridge, not the brow ridge, but the brow, you know, it's like the whole orbital area is a little tricky, especially when you start turning to 3/4, right? It's very common to see people nailing the likeness from the front and making like spot on, especially like people who are using a photograph as a blueprint and just copying it, right? Just like placing things. It's very common to just like nail it and then just slap a, you know, it's like a photograph as a texture and then call it done, you know? But then it's very common as well to see the same model when someone shows like the making of and then switches like the 3/4 and then it falls apart. The model is like the relationships are all wrong, right? Either the eyes are too deep in relation to the rest of the face or the opposite. Or for example, the corners of the mouth, they don't have enough depth, so the mouth looks flat, right? It's the kind of stuff like if you have a reasonable knowledge about like this, the skull, right? Like the bone structure underneath, you're gonna understand that there is an arc on the top and the bottom, right? Like for the teeth. And depending on the type of skull, if it's a European skull, it's probably going to be a little bit more flat. In a case of an African, like I'm doing right now, it's a little bit more pronounced. So the teeth have a little bit more of an angle, right? And then, but obviously everything has a ton of variations, right? Like every time I start looking at skulls, like proportions, for example, like how deep the skull has to go, I look at myself in the mirror and my skull is pretty, you know, it's like it's not very deep. I have like kind of like a shallow kind of head. Every time I take my hat off and I look and I was like, huh, it's not quite that proportion. So there's all kinds of variations, right? And then here, like different facial expressions that can actually help to, you know, solve some problems. In this case here, you know, getting an astronaut, right? And getting like all those pictures from different, you know, it's like interviews and whatever it is, you know. The camera, the lens angle is very important as well. Remember when I was talking about yesterday about this guy here, how much it looks like his face is very, very thin, right? It has a lot to do with, I think like a couple of things are contributing to that. One of that is the fact that his whole like lower part of the ear is missing here. There's a gap, right? Because it's always stretched out and there's this hole in here. So it's almost like you're missing what we normally expect to see, like a normal ear would be. And then that's actually creating this illusion that there's a much bigger negative space than it would normally have. But then there's the fact as well that the lens look a little, you know, wide angle. It kind of looks like you know, it's like a 35 or a 50 from, you know, it's like if you're trying to do take a picture from close up, right? The general rule, if you do any photography at all, when it comes like to portraits, is that you know, people have like options obviously to use whatever lens they want, but I normally use primes for taking pictures and stuff. And what I normally do, if it's like a close up like tight like this one, right? It's just like basically like just the head and a little bit of the neck. I would use like a 85 in this case, right? Same for here, it would be an 85, but in this case you can tell it's not an 85, right? And this one looks flatter than an 85. This is probably like over 100, right? Sometimes like if you're using like a zoom lens, you can use like a 200 to make the face completely flat like that, right? And what gives away how flat the lens is or how wide angle it is, it's like if you're looking at the ears, for example, if you have access to the ears, you're gonna see like with a flat lens, like a, you know, like a 135 or 200, you're gonna see the ears almost completely like that. And then if the same person, you start looking at the picture and then the predominant part is mostly the face itself and the ears start kind of disappearing behind the mask of the face, the silhouette of the face in there, then you can tell that that's basically like getting more and more wide angle, right? The other giveaway is basically the size of the nose, right? They're gonna start seeing things much more distorted. The nose is gonna get bigger, the mouth is gonna get wider, the eye is gonna look more apart, right? Because you're creating this almost like a fisheye kind of effect, like not quite like fisheye, right? But it's just like the distortion is starting to happen in there. One that I looked here, let's see. This one is an example, right? It's very common. You can find it. Just put like portrait lens compared. And then this is an example that pops normally. If you look at this one, for example, it's pretty clear, right? Like you go from 35, which has this very large mouth, very big nose, very far apart eyes, right? And basically like the dominant part is the face itself, is starting with the most prominent part, which would be like the tip of the nose, right? And everything around that area, oh, what did I do here? Everything around that area is going to start getting like, you know, a little distorted, right? If you have like a fisheye lens, this is going to be exaggerated. And then all of a sudden you're going to see just nose and everything is going to be behind that big nose. It is like a super, you know, distorted lens. And the opposite is true as well. You go like a 135, right? Which is a great lens, by the way. You get like a smaller nose, right? And you get like a smaller mouth size. The face looks more elegant. It doesn't look too distorted. You can see the ears completely, right? But obviously, like the ears, just you have to compare the same person under different lenses to be able to see what's going on, because some people have like very opened up ears, right? Like kind of Dumbo ears. And some people have very tiny ears, almost like a mouse. So you cannot compare between different people, obviously. You're going to have to compare within the same person in different situations and different settings. Same thing goes for those examples here, right? Like it's the same deal. Comparing like what a 350 millimeters, so like a super zoom lens, right? Something, the kind of lens that people are going to probably use in nature, right? Like to capture like a bird from fly away and stuff like that. It's normally like a very a way to stay away from the subject, right? You're going to get like those larger numbers. And then here at 24, right? Like all the same subject, but like completely different faces, right? Just by preventing this distortion. So the rule I was talking about before, which is not a rule, but it's just like recommended, right? So 85 to, I would say 135 would be like good lenses for just like locked up like face and shoulders, right? And then you're probably gonna use like, yeah, between 85 and 135. I use the 100 millimeters a lot, which is a macro lens I have. And the 100 makes like beautiful portraits for this kind of like head and shoulders, you know. And then as you go a little bit further, for example, if you want to take a picture of someone from the waist up, so like, you know, showing the entire torso and head, then a 50 millimeters is pretty good. It really helps. And then a 35 you would use for a full body shot or something. You know, it's like if you're in a setting like you don't have a lot of space, right? Like you're in a party or something like that, and the room is not that big. You can use a 35 to actually capture entire scenes. It's a great, very cinematic kind of lens, which I love as well. The 35 is one of my favorites. 35, the 85, and I would say like the 100, which is like close enough to the 85, but just because it's a macro lens as well, so it's more flexible for me. So those are some of my favorite ones. Yeah, and then when it comes to trying to decipher what's going on with the picture, like a picture like that you just found on the internet, it's gonna have to be like a bunch of experimentations, right? If I brought this picture into Maya, for example, and I start playing with the model and with the camera lenses in there, I would eventually hit something like this that could be like completely, you know, it's like I could try to nail this one pretty good. But because I always try to do those things like by eyeballing things, just out of like challenge, like personal challenge, you know, having more fun with that and actually try to use like lots of blueprints and scans and things like that, which you guys are free to do, you know. It's just like, I always think it's better for you to push how much you can see as far as you can. And then if later on you're in trouble and the model has something that really doesn't look anything like it, then you can just like bring the model. And I always tell people, you know, it's like that's basically what I do. I instead of like bring it to Maya and doing something completely precise, I simply bring a ZBrush on top of it, which like obviously my model is not going to match at all here. But it's just like make a see-through, you know, and then you can actually scale your model down and then reposition it. and then play with the lens as well, you know, and then try to get something that looks like in a similar position, right? But not the same, like identical or anything like that. But that's gonna be something like later on if I get it, you know, like in huge trouble. But I'm gonna try to push. This was just like the sketch from yesterday, so we have plenty of room to play with it, right? So and then let's reset this scale here, so we are working with the right scale from now on. And then we're gonna create a little scene in Maya, just like to put some lights in there. If you're not familiar with the way that Arnold works, we're gonna talk a little bit about lighting. Put a little basic shader, just to have like a scene set that we can use to iterate from that point on. And then at the end of the class, we're gonna go back to sculpting, and I'm gonna try to be more careful about explaining exactly what I'm doing, how I'm setting up my brushes and things like that. So let's do this. So starting with the model, if you look at the poly count, it's only like 253,000 polys, and it's basically just like the Sculptress Pro that I was using, right? And what I did yesterday, I had to actually, because if you remember, I had a hole in one of his eyes. There was a huge hole in there. What I did, I actually had to mirror and weld the whole thing. And if you never did this, it works like this. So let me turn off the perspective here, right? So it's basically like this. You can actually press Shift Control, then hide one of the sides, right? You normally hide the right side, something like around here. Oh, without the symmetry, obviously. Oops. X to turn off symmetry. So I'm gonna turn, just like hide half of it and see if I can get really half of it. Maybe a little bit more on that. Oops. Oh, my Control Z is getting a little slow here. I don't know what's going on in the background. I swear I'm not downloading anything. Okay, something like that. So now I have the face in there. What you can do, you can go to your geometry, and you can say delete hidden under the modify topology, right? So I have that one deleted, and then right here you have the mirror and weld. So if you click that one, it basically like welds everything for you. So that's how I did to fix that hole. But the difference is that it was the other side, right? So I had to actually mirror my model and just like do the merge in there as well. So starting with this one, let's just export it straight away because it has, you know, the number of polygons is pretty low. It was just high enough to screw up my my timeline yesterday when I tried to scrub and go back to all the way to the cube that we started. You're gonna see like in the video that basically starts in a point that we already had it partially sculpted at the beginning, but missed like some important steps, like from the, you know. So that happens with ZBrush. If you have like a model that the geometry starts getting a little bit heavy, it doesn't have memory to calculate the whole history, and then ends up like screwing it up. But yeah, we got the most of the stuff, and the rest is actually recorded in the video, so we can always look at that. So I'm gonna export this one. Go into Tool, Export, and I'm gonna go to my personal projects, African tribes, and then OBJ. So I'm gonna export this one as sketch one, just like that. And let's bring this one to Maya. So in Maya, we're gonna get, we have a lot of stuff open, so let's just click this one. So in Maya here, I'm gonna just bring it. One thing that's important for you to do, if you never did this before, instead of simply clicking import, click the little option box. And then here, if you scroll down all the way, you're gonna have to set up, for example, like the type first. So I'm gonna put like OBJ in here to import. And then a new option is gonna show up here, which is like, you see like multiple objects. That's the default that Maya comes with. This is gonna screw up the whole thing because if you have multiple poly groups, it's gonna come like all chopped and the model is never gonna match the same topology. So make sure you have single object in there. You can even press like edit save settings. And then you can click import. And that's gonna assure that the model is gonna come in one single piece and the geometry topology is gonna match it every single time. So I'm gonna import this one. And because I did like, just starting with the regular sized cube in ZBrush, that's basically the size of the head that came. So if you look in comparison to the squares in here, each one of them is supposed to represent 1 inch, right? So it's only like 2 inches long or something like that. So let's just double check that. I'm gonna click this guy here, animation preferences, but it's actually all preferences, right? And then I'm gonna click settings, and it is inches indeed. So I'm using inches, so we should be good to go. If you press space in Maya, if you're not familiar, you can switch, to multiple views, like 4 views. You can also click those boxes in here. You can click and test what they do. So this one is the 4 view. So if I go to the Z view, this one here, so that's like the front, right? I'm gonna press space again, so that's gonna max it out. And now I can actually create a measure tool. To do that, you go to your create, measure tools, and then distance tool. You can actually just click the top in here just to dock it out. And then I'm gonna just click distance tool, and I can actually start from here. And first off, let's look at the size of a human head in average, right? Which I pulled in here. In average, a male, it's about almost like 9.5 inches tall for the head. And then in centimeters would be like 24 centimeters, right? And then for a female, I believe like, oh, it says like 99 percentile. Okay, yeah, so it's like similar, I guess. Yeah, I'm gonna have to take a look. 8.6 inches, 50 percentile. Okay. Yeah, interesting that they have the same number in there. Male and female the same. I think this, I don't know, looks a little wrong to me, but it's okay. So I'm gonna consider this one 9.4 inches tall for the average. And then maybe a little bit less than that. If it's 99 percentile, I can actually do a little bit less than that. So if each one of those squares is 1 inch, so I'm gonna start with like something around here maybe. I'm gonna click 1 time. I already clicked the distance tool, so click 1 time. Then press shift, hold shift, and then you click around here, and then you can move it around while you press shift. And I can get to a size, let's say like 9, something like 9. Right? It's not like completely precise, but if you want to precise, you can actually, select those guys, the locators, and actually just type the distance in there. For example, you're going to see the distance translate -5. So let's see if we want to do like an identical, a perfect number in here. So let's see, 5.5. And this one is going to be 5.5. Right? You got like, you should get like a perfect, let's see, 9.1. Oh, actually, dude, I'm tripping here. Is the Y, sorry, YX. So 4.5 and then 4.5 here. So now we should get like a perfect 9, right? So that's basically what we have in there. So 9 inches tall. So now with that in mind, I can just like click the head, press R for scale, right? R for scale. And then the middle mouse button, I'm just gonna slide it all the way. And I'm gonna reposition. To reposition like the measure stuff, you can just click like both of the locators, and you can just like at the same time move them. So I'm gonna put like roughly around like the middle here. Doesn't need to be super precise too. Even more so because I don't have like the head completely done, and I think I need more volume at the top, right? So I'm gonna put like close enough to the 9 inches in here. Something like that. Even if it's a little smaller or a little bigger, it doesn't matter a lot in here because of all the variations we have. In terms of the lens in here, by default, Maya uses a 35. I think most softwares do. So let's change that. So I'm gonna click View, select Camera, and then I'm gonna see like some options in here, right? Like all those boxes, and then the focal length, it shows as 35 in here. I'm gonna switch it to either like 55 or 60. Let's do like 60. Why 60 is because like it's closer to what the human eye is. If you compare a human eye to a lens, it should be around 55 or 60. So that's kind of equivalent to, if you're looking at someone, with your own eyes instead of like through the lenses. So it's kind of cool to see like that. But obviously, if I'm going to try to match that picture that I was looking before, then I might be going back and forth between maybe like 35 to 50, because I have an, you know, I believe that's around that number we're going to have to use. And so I'm going to just like freeze this model now. You see, like I created this, all these shortcuts in here. Normally, to create, you just press Shift Control, and then you click any of those Shift Control and Alt, something like that. Don't remember. And you basically like you click anything you want. Let's try Shift Control Alt. So workspace. If I want to get like let's see, some mesh connected here. Oh, not that one. So I think it's just Shift Control. It's been a while since I actually did that. Yeah, just Shifted Control. So it's going to create a new icon in there, right? We can actually remove it if you want, right? And you have to actually save your shelves, your tabs later. So basically like do like a save all shelves if you're changing stuff. But that's the way I created, you know. It's like, so for those guys here, the freeze, reset, and in center pivot, you can press Shift Control, and you can go to, for example, like modify, and you have all those guys in here, like the freeze transformations, reset transformations, right? And then under edit, you should have, let's see, modify, let's see, center pivot, right? So those are basically the ones I have. So freeze, reset, and center pivot. Under those guys, you can actually check before you do it, just to make sure that you have like all the channels you want to do, like translate, rotate, and scale. You can save it with just one of those channels, for example. You create like different ones, but that's how I created those guys. And then to move around, you can always use like the middle mouse and just like reposition stuff and then save it again. You know, just like I normally create like a little custom, put either under the custom or create a new tab, and then just like put the stuff that I use the most. So in this case here, I'm gonna do a freeze first and then a reset. And that's it. I'm not gonna use the center pivot. So that way, the center of the object's right here. I could maybe like, if that's your preference, you could probably like, maybe like if you wanna bring the head above that, for example, like have the chin touching the origin of the world in there. It's up to you as well. I can do that, you know. Now it's already scaled, so I'm gonna just do a freeze. You're gonna see the pivot in here changing, so freeze and reset. So it's gonna go to the 0, 0, 0 in the world. And then now I can actually save my scene. I'm just gonna save on top of the one I had before. And I'm gonna export my object. So file, we're gonna do export selection. And then I'm gonna go to the option box. And we're gonna put OBJ in here. And then here you can choose if you want to put any of those things. I mean, it's not gonna matter because we are not changing much and it's gonna go straight to ZBrush. So just gonna go export selection. Gonna go back to my OBJ folder, the one that was that we created manually yesterday, right? We created the references, OBJ and ZBrush. It's gonna go to OBJ. And then this is the one I just brought in. So I'm gonna put like just like sketch 2 to send back to ZBrush. You can be more organized than that as well and put like from Maya to ZBrush, from ZBrush to Maya, or whatever works the best for you. And then now, since I only have like one subtool so far, which is this little sketch, right? And the resolution I'm importing is exactly the same. I can simply import on top of this one. So I'm gonna just do an import and then sketch 2. That should pop bigger now. And from now on, I'm not gonna change anything in here. There is one thing here, for example, if you go to export all the way down in ZBrush, you see like everything is reset to 0, 0, 0, scale at 1, right? That's the expected behavior from ZBrush to Maya. You're always gonna export without changing any of those things. If by mistake you change anything here, your model is gonna start like expanding and shrinking, you know, it's like in Maya. So don't change anything, you know, it's like from this point on, if you brought your model, it's in ZBrush, don't poke around those values or anything. Just trust that the model, when you send back to Maya, it should be in the same position and with the same scale, right? So that's gonna be the first thing. Now that we have the model in there, let's play a little bit with some settings in here because like I said yesterday, I want you guys to be able to start doing renders very early on, because what happens a lot is that we start trusting too much in those render views, like with the shaded mode. uh, uh, either like in Maya or ZBrush, right? And it's so hard to judge the forms themselves. Even when you do renders like BPR, you know, sometimes it's hard to trust what's actually going on. I'd rather have renders with a nice HDRI map already assigned, something that gives you an idea that the model is actually a physical model within the environment. It's easier for the brain to actually understand that model as being like a real object, and then it's like much easier for you to judge the forms, right? Obviously, that just one HDRI map is not going to tell the whole story, because if you have a light that's coming like too much from the top, right, you're missing the opportunity of having, like, for example, like a bounced light that's revealing some more of the forms on the other side. So the best thing is to have the scene assembled, and then you start playing with those maps and have like multiple of them loaded in Maya, so you can turn on and off and experiment with them. And if the face is working across like different environments, like try to get some very different ones, that means that the forms are supposed to be fairly in the right spot, right? So let's do that. Let's go back to Maya, and let's start with a little scene here. If you never worked with Arnold, it's pretty powerful, you know. Like I said, I cannot say much about the GPU because my computer doesn't quite work well with it yet. But the CPU is, you know, the speed is fairly good if you're using like lower settings and things like that. And then you have to understand that if you're using higher settings, obviously it's gonna start like getting a little heavy. So to start here, if you're not familiar with Maya, the navigation here I'm doing is just I'm pressing Alt and then clicking outside with my left click, right? And I can actually orbit around. And then if I press Alt and then the middle button, I can actually just like go around like that. If it's like Alt and then the two, like the middle button and the left button at the same time, then I can actually go zoom in and out. Just like now, little navigation. Those things you can find like little tutorials on YouTube, you know, if you're not very familiar with Maya. But it's easy enough to navigate, you know, after you get, you know, familiar with it. So first thing you're going to do here, we already set up our scene to 900. Actually, it's 1200 by 1200. Let me just switch back to 900 by 900. The first here, 900 by 900. And then all the other settings is basically exactly what we were doing yesterday. I'm going to go back to 6 for anti-alias, so we are not too crazy about it. And then the rest is going to keep the same. So if you try to do a render right now without setting anything, it should be just a black screen, right? So Maya itself has its own render view, but we're going to be using the Arnold render view. So to access it, you're going to go to Arnold and then open Arnold render view. As I mentioned before, this is Maya 2020, but it looks exactly the same as 2019 in lots of ways. So everything's going to be the same spot. So I'm going to click that one. So I have my render view in there. You can expand this one. You have like different types of you know, color space you can use. You can actually correct stuff like exposure and gamma using this you know, little panel. And then when you want to render something, you can always like check if that's the correct camera. Obviously, that's the only camera you have in the scene. So it's like perspective shape, and it's rendering just the beauty pass because we're not adding any different passes in there, right? So I'm just going to click the render, and it should be completely black, right? So no light in scene, right? It's not going to do anything. So let's keep this one live. You see, like, if I don't press stop, this is live. So anything I do here, it should try to render in kind of like semi-real time, right? So you see, it's trying to render in there. So let's actually, if I keep it live, it's going to be a little hard for me to work. But after you have the lights in place, we can do that. So I'm going to just click stop IPR, and let's create our first light in here. Same way you create in any other package. I mean, like the lights are all here under Arnold. And also in the Hypershade, you can find them in there as nodes. But it's easier to just go in here, and then we're gonna have like obviously the area lights. That's gonna be the softbox kind of light, right? Gonna have your sky dome light that we're gonna plug our HDRIs to it. Mesh light, you can transform any mesh into a light source, right? Photometric light, if you download the data from the internet from the light bulb makers, you can actually get like physically accurate, especially like for architecture, people use a lot, right, to create like this very realistic light effects, for example, like reflected on the wall, things like that. Like Portal, you know, it's like if you have like an indoors light and you want to, you know, simulate like a, you know, a light coming from the window. Physical sky, right? That's basically like based on parameters, you can actually generate like have a physical sun and sky, and have like a very realistic kind of, you know, especially for architecture, people use this a lot. But we're going to be using basically just the area light and the sky dome light. So the first light we're going to be creating is going to be the area light. And there are a couple of ways to do this here. If I create a light, you're going to get automatically like you know, the attributes of the light in here. If you don't, for any reason, have this closed up, you can always press Control A. And then, for example, if I have something like this, press Control A, it switches back to the attributes, right? So I'm just gonna move this up. Yeah, sometimes like it refuses to do that. Let's just turn this one off so I have access to it again. And then let's see if now it's easier. So now I have my light in there, and then you can actually play with the size of the light, right? So if I grow it like that with a regular press R and then scale it up, that's the size of the softbox. So obviously, the smaller the light source, the sharper the shadow is going to be, and the bigger you go, the softer the shadow is going to be, right? Because you're going to get like all diffused in the process. So like for beauty shots, normally people use large soft boxes. So in this case here, I'm using like, you know, semi-big softbox. That's going to be our first light in here. So I'm going to put like just like a very simple, let's maybe like do an angle here, a little bit beyond 45 from the top, just like a top light like that. And then if I try to render this one, you're probably still going to see a black result right now, like nothing to see, right? You cannot see anything in there. It's because we have to tweak this light a little bit. The first thing you're going to do, first we're going to add a little bit more samples. So I'm going to put 2 instead of 1. And then there's a setting here that's called normalize. And this one is kind of like, it allows you for a more artistic approach. So for example, like in real life, if you have like a large softbox and you have like the same intensity, right? Like added to a softbox that's very tiny in the same intensity, like same power for the light in a large softbox, you're gonna have like a different type of effect, right? Like it's going to be the same type of light, but it's going to be more diffused. Basically, like if you use normalize, it becomes more artistic. I mean, like it doesn't matter the size of the light, I believe. It kind of like the size, the physical size of the object here, the intensity is going to be the same, you know? And if you have this off, that means like the bigger you go with the light source, the more light you get, the smaller you get, the less light you get. So for example, if I go smaller here, it's going to do 2 things. It should go like sharper in terms of the shadows, right? And more dim. So it's going to be kind of like, it's going to fade away, right? So it's like more dim, and then this one's going to get stronger and softer at the same time. So if you try that with the normalize, first it's going to disappear here, right? So I'm going to have to compensate by adding, for example, like more exposure. So for example, if I do like, let's say 100, is it too much? It's quite a lot, isn't it? Let's see, skip 1. Let's try, let's see if this is going to do anything. Yeah, so 500, let's try 2000, something like that. So now I'm going to try to make it smaller. You see, it's still the same amount of light. It's just getting sharper and sharper, right? So it's a very creative way that, you know, it's like you can use it. I kind of like the first option better, but it's up to you guys if you want to use this, you know, because this way, for example, if you find the sweet spot for the light, for example, oh, that's the right amount of light, then it's just a matter of finding the, you know, it's like the amount of diffuse shadows that you want. You know, you might like this one better. I'm gonna leave it up to you. I'm gonna turn it off in my case here, and now it becomes super big in here, so the intensity is very high. So I'm gonna get like maybe 5. And then I'm gonna play with, actually, it's a tiny, oh, some people, by the way, like you can use intensity, you can always keep at 1. Some people prefer to use the exposure. It gives like a different results sometimes, you know? So it's up to you if you wanna use exposure instead of like the intensity. I normally use intensity, but if you wanna try to do something more accurate, if you actually work with photography, you know, you can try the exposure channel. So basically, like if I do anything here now, I approach the model, like get a little closer and stuff. The render is, you know, it's still CPU, it's not GPU, but it's definitely trying to do like in real time for me, right? Which is really cool. So this we are talking about like a single light, right? So nothing a lot, no mistake, you know, it's like no fanciness in there. But it's just like a top light at this point, right? So we cannot evaluate the forms that much. A lot of people use like 3-point lights, 2-point lights. If you're going for a more artistic, kind of like a Baroque painting and stuff, we're gonna use a single light like I'm doing here. But you're probably gonna be, oh, look, it's flipped. But you're gonna be probably using more of like an angle, right? Like simulating like it's a light source from a window from the top, or maybe like a candle, you can make the light a little bit warmer, right? So if I get something more like from the side, like here, more like a 45 degree, and then I just click render again. Let's see, what did I do in there? I think I went a little bit too far, so I'm gonna have to increase my intensity. Let's try 6 in here, or it's just because I'm too far. Let's see. Oh, interesting. I bet it's because I flipped the light, isn't it? I bet that's what it is. That's so weird because the light looks normal. Because before I had it flipped like that. It's funny. Yeah, it's actually flipped. So interesting. I wonder why it's doing that. That's the first for me. Yeah, so like in theory, this little line should be pointing to the direction, right? But for some reason here, it's yeah, I never noticed that. So in this case, I'm just gonna go and reduce the intensity a little bit, 4. And then again, this is just like one single light, like kind of like a Rembrandt light is the kind of light that a lot of people like to use. That is just creates this triangle under one of the eyes, right? So the light comes in 45 degrees from the side and from the front at the same time. It creates a little triangle under the eye. I probably have to tweak a little bit to get that effect in there. And then obviously you can use other lights to bounce from the side. You can create a rim light, a hair light, things like that. Like 3-point lights. There are many books, including the ones I mentioned in those links. There is one in there that is what I have in here in the office that, you know, it's like it shows you the structure of how many lights are being used, what's the positioning of the lights, and showing a photograph that exemplifies, you know, it's like what's going on if you add those many lights in there. So that's like the approach for the area light. Other things you can use like color temperature, right? So if you're doing, for example, like based on real world, 6500 is basically like a white light. That's kind of like a neutral light. If you go lower and lower, you're gonna get more and more yellow, kind of incandescent light, right? That's why when you go to the store and you get like a 3500 Kelvin light bulb, it's gonna get like this kind of like warm feel. And then as you go higher and higher, you're gonna get more and more like daylight, like around 6500. And then if you go, like for example, you go in the snow, right? Like you're skiing, you're gonna start seeing everything becomes a little bit more blue, you know, kind of like 7,000, 8,000 Kelvin. But for something neutral, something between 6,000 and 6,500 should be pretty neutral. So let's stop this one and let's add one HDRI now. The HDRI is gonna come from that same website from yesterday, HDRI Haven, right? So we're gonna go in there, you're gonna click in your HDRIs, you're gonna look for either indoors or outdoors, and I'm gonna be pointing you guys to some of my favorite ones. Let's just move this out of the way for a second. My monitors are funny because it's kind of getting stuck halfway like that, and I have to go to the other monitor and pull it. Kind of weird. I don't know what happened. It's one of those updates like the NVIDIA actually start bugging out. So let's add another light here. So the first one was area light. So we're gonna add another one, and this one is gonna be a sky dome light. So I click on it, and you're gonna see this sphere all around. And then we're gonna go here in the properties. Again, if you're not seeing properties, just press Control A and should pop this interface in here. You should be able to see it. And then right where you have the color in here, you have white and you have this little checker, click the checker and then click File. And let's look for a file in here in the hard drive. I think I have one. Actually, I have my little collection here. So HDRI collection. And those are some of the latest I downloaded from the same website. I have a bunch in there. Actually, those ones I think I downloaded from the Google Drive. So I have like a bunch of them really. And then you have the previews like that. And then you have obviously the actual HDRIs, right? So let's look for some of the ones I used in the past in here. You can look for indoors and then house. I have from different sources in here. There's some of them I got from this guy called Max. I don't remember his last name. It's the same deal. You pay like, I don't know, $5, $10, and then you get a bunch of HDRIs. And I believe he's from Montreal. There's a bunch of HDRIs made in Montreal, so it should be. But there is one map in there in that website. It's called Veranda 4K. If you look for that in that HDRI Haven, that's basically the map. It looks like this. It's kind of like a outdoors, kind of outdoors. It's kind of like in the shade, but you have like this light source from there. Kind of like a cool little environment. And then, so let's see what happens if you simply render with the default settings in here. So we have that the area light in there. So let's just render the area light plus this other light. And then now it's very, very diffuse, right? The light is very global. So first thing you're gonna do is just turn off the area light altogether. So you can either do this illuminate by default, you can just click at this one, or you can just Control H and hide the area light. They're gonna just turn off. So now it's basically just HDRI, right? But you see like it's very, very global because the light is coming from the front. It's coming all the way from there, right? So if you want to make it a little bit more dramatic, you can always click the environment in here. It's going to select that little sphere outside, like that. And then we're going to start spinning around. So I'm going to click the middle click in here. I'm going to click this little, gizmo. And you're going to start like rotating. Let's render it again. And maybe like keep rotating until you get something a little bit more dramatic. My computer is surprisingly slow when it comes to this right now, which is not quite normal. I'm probably gonna do a reset tonight, so we have something a little bit more refreshed tomorrow. So now it's starting to get a little bit more of like a little bit more dramatic in there. Obviously, I can always cheat, right? I can actually spin this around like in different angles and get stuff like to look like it's coming from different angles, like spin it around, make the light come more from the top, whatever, sometimes you can do that by using one map in the background, one of those guys, those spheres in the background, the light domes, and then another one to render, right? Like, so you can fake things. You can add like a bunch of those and then control the intensity of each one of them individually. And then just play with them, I would say like the best thing is like is to actually play with those maps, HDRIs, because every time you see an HDRI in the pictures and you see all those examples, it doesn't tell the whole story, Sometimes the light looks like, oh, I'm not gonna get this one because it looks very greenish. But sometimes you can actually color correct them, and as long as the reflections are nice, it's like that the light source comes from a nice place, kind of like a higher light is normally the stuff I use the most, or side light to simulate like a window, right? So at this point here, if I click 1:1 in here, that's the size I'm rendering. So I'm not using a lot of the screen. So if I zoom in, right, obviously I'm gonna use more of it. And then the render should be a little bit slower, but not by much because, we don't have a lot of resolution going on right now. So let's take a look at the rest of the stuff here when it comes to the HDRI. I just wanted you guys to have an idea about how to plug those things because, you know, so you can start doing your renders kind of straight away. So I'm gonna do this, and then again, select the dome light, and then you can start playing with things. For example, if you click this little area here now, where the map is plugged, and you scroll down, you're gonna see that the HDRI, because we set it up automatically, it's coming as raw, right? If you switch this to sRGB, you're probably not gonna get the same result. It's gonna look different, right? The menu actually tells you to use like raw for HDRI, so that's how we keep it. So there are ways you can actually color correct this. For example, sometimes you find a cool map that looks too warm and you want to make it a little bit cooler. You can do this by using specialized nodes in Maya, or like a very cheap way to do it is using this color balance you know, node in here. So for example, let's pretend this map was like very yellow, right? You can actually add a little offset in here with blue and the color gain to blue as well. So you can shift a little bit towards blue like this. And then everything gets more like a night kind of feel to it, right? If the opposite happens, you can do the opposite here, like get a little bit more yellow, right? You get a little warmer. And obviously this is gonna be like the range you have in here. You don't need to add a lot of it, but sometimes just a little hint of yellow in a very bluish map can actually help you, you know? And you can also use the offset, right? The offset's gonna wash things out. And then you can also add some color in there, you know, and create like different effects. So just like, you know, simple things you can do to just, you know, it's like it's very common. You get to, you find like an HDRI that's super cool, and then all of a sudden like, oh man, I'm not gonna use it because it's too yellow or it's too blue. No, no, no. Just look at the reflections. Look if it's a cool map, you know, it's like if it's giving some drama to your scene for whatever your intention is. And just do some color correction, you should be good, you know. That's basically it. So for the rest of the properties of the dome light, if you click on it again, I'm gonna just like click like I'm gonna put here 2 for the samples, just to get a little bit less noisy. It adds a little bit of render time, but not by much. And then one thing that I do, I play with the camera visibility. So if I go down in here, everything's gonna get darker, right? So the background goes darker and darker until it completely disappears to black. So that's what I'm saying. Sometimes you can actually create 2 of those dome lights, or 3, or how many you want, and you can fake things. You can use one just for the lighting like this. And then maybe like you don't want the full intensity coming from this one, right? So you can actually reduce everything by half here. For example, you can do like a 0.5 to everything, and then everything is gonna go a little bit more dim. And you can actually just add another one and compensate for the other half. That way you have like a better mix between the 2 light setups, and one is gonna be in charge of producing the, you know, the reflections. For example, if you want one just creating reflections, you can just like crank like the specular in here to 1. And then the other one is you can just like eliminate this completely, and that's not gonna produce any reflection, right? So you're gonna use like a specific HDRI to create the reflections, and another just to, you know, for whatever else. So in this case of this guy here, I used a similar approach. I had one light that was mostly like for certain reflections, and the other one was, you know, it's just like for the overall lighting itself. So it's, you know, tricks you can use, you know, it's like as long as it's not too blatant, right? Like it's something that you can tell straight away that the lighting doesn't match the reflections or something like that. That's why I say like it's good to blend them, right? And that's basically true for this model here as well. Let's just get back to it very fast. And then, so for this guy, let's see if I can find one here that shows more of it. Yeah, maybe like this one here. So this guy here, right? So when I did this one, I was having some success with the HDRI. only. But then I decided to actually do this thing that we're going to experiment with it, which is create like this flashlight effect, right? Which is very common if you're taking a picture of someone in a setting. Flashlight, you know, it's like it just hits spot on, so you're going to get this nice reflection. It's going to reveal a lot of your specular maps and your displacement maps, but without taking over too much. So you're going to still have a little bit of the global light. You're going to get the flashlight, and then to create this effect that everything is overexposed in the or like correctly exposed in the front view, in the foreground. Normally, if you take a picture, for example, if you're taking pictures of with a flashlight for background photography, some insects and stuff, normally it exposes correctly what's in focus right there, and underexposes everything underneath, you know, it's like you know, in the background. So it's very common to see like a leaf and an insect completely well exposed, and then everything else is like underexposed in the background. So to create that effect, I simply used that thing, you know, it's like it's just a camera in here, instead of using like a full-on one in here to see the entire background. I probably put around like 100 and something like that, just underexposed on purpose, you know. And then, yeah, so that's like the basics of it, you know, for the lighting. So you can start playing with it. And obviously, we're going to be going much further than this, experimenting with a lot more stuff, especially when you start adding the skin shader and all that stuff. And yeah, so it's going to be cool. Last thing here before you go back to ZBrush and do some sculpting there. Let me just stop this one again. And let's let me show you, introduce you to the hypershade. This little sphere in here, that's the hypershade. You can also find it under Window Rendering Editors, and then hypershade is right there. That's basically like where you create your shaders, right? Like you can put all the networks together in there. And then, whoa. Dude, I'm telling you, like, it's so bizarre because I just maximized it and it went away from the top of my screen. Kind of like got lost in there. I don't even know how to get it back now. Oh man, got lost completely. I tell you, there's something with the resolution. You see, like it just popped back. I think it's like the two monitors are not talking too much together in there. But let's just go up here. And then, so for the shaders, we have this tab in here that says Arnold. And then this is basically like everything that's involved with Arnold, like all the nodes possible, including lights and everything. But they are actually broken down in here. So just lights, it's just shaders. So the way that Arnold works, he has this thing that's kind of like an Uber shader, right? That has, you can create like most of the shaders using a single shader, which is this AI standard surface. So with that, you can create like skin, you can create metals, you can create wood, anything, because it has all the physical properties in there. It's just a matter of like plugging the right values, you know, it's like I can point you to the online manual. And there are lots of examples in there as well. And there are also lots of presets in here. So if you click right here on the side, you're gonna see there is this preset button. If you click on it, you have like plastic, rubber, skin, right? Thin plastic, all kinds of stuff. So in this case here, if you want to create like a quick and dirty skin, you can just click this one and you can say like just replace, right? Because otherwise you can blend with whatever shader you had before. You can just add a little bit of it, but in this case, it's going to replace it. And then I don't quite like the, you know, the default skin, but it's just to show you how it works. If you scroll down in your shader properties in here, you're going to look at subsurface. And oh, that's cool that it's already random walk in there, but I like random walk 2 better. It's the latest version, especially for thin surfaces. It works like much better. But the colors in here, I don't quite like the default stuff, but let's apply this one. So to apply the shader, you can just go to your model. You can select it, or you can simply drag and drop to the model, or simply right click right here on the shader and then say assign material to viewport selection, right? So now it has that shader. And now if I play it again, that has subsurface now, right? Super scattery, by the way, because that's the default settings in there. So let's see how we can do a little tweaking there very quickly. If I go to my shader properties in here, let's look at the scale in here. So the scale for the subsurface scattering. So by default is 1 in here. I would start with 0.130, something like that. Should give you like a fairly good ballpark. I would say like between 110 and 140 would be kind of like the ballpark for the world scale. That's basically what I normally use. And then this basically controls how much back scatter versus front scatter you're getting. Right, so you can control that using that. Sometimes you need a little bit more of a boost, but I'm gonna keep it 0 for now. And then the color of the skin, basically, you can use either like the subsurface color in here. And then, for example, if I try to change the color of the base of my base, like this is the base color, right? If I try to change anything, you're not gonna see any changes in there, right? And why is that? It's because first, like the weight in here has to be cranked, but still is not gonna do anything, because what's gonna happen with the subsurface scattering in Arnold is that this weight in here is actually cranked all the way to 1. That means that this is gonna override anything that's coming from this channel in here, from the base channel. So if I start going back in here and mixing this back, so that's going to reduce the amount of scatter, and it's going to blend with whatever color I have in here. So if I have a color like, let's pick something very weird like green. So that color is coming from the base color now, and I have like only 0.2 of subsurface. If I keep going higher and higher here, at some point, this color here is going to take over, right? And I'm going to just get the little hints of green like that, all the way to just this color taking completely over. So it's another thing you can do, you know, it's like if you're gonna do like rubber, sometimes it's good to keep a little bit of the base color so it doesn't go completely scattery. But if it's skin, I normally keep it all the way to 1. Some people prefer to keep like 0.95 and then add a tiny little bit of the, you know, from the base, but it's really up to you. So with this in mind, like just with this information today, if you had nothing to do with Arnold before, you had no idea how to start, at least you can already, you know, scale your model today, and then, or a sketch if you have one in there, and then, you know, it's like start playing with those things. It gets very fun, you know. I told you guys yesterday that's kind of hard to work at night after a full day of work and, you know, stuff around the house, helping to clean and dropping kids in school and stuff like that. So there are going to be days that you guys are going to be exhausted, and same with me. So sometimes when that happens, in order for you to keep pushing forward, because it's very important for you to keep pushing forward, otherwise you're not going to be able to, you know, develop your model completely. Just pick like if you're completely exhausted, pick something that's very easy to do. And for me, my favorite thing to do when I'm completely exhausted, I have no energy to sculpt, is to actually go to HDRI Haven, download a bunch of HDRI maps, and start experimenting with them and taking notes, you know, it's like which ones work better for my model and stuff like that. So yeah, you can put like a hierarchy note, you know, it's like on the side of your computer. And if, for example, like from least to most favorite things you do. And, you know, it's like if your favorite thing is to sculpt, then by all means, like when you have full on energy, keep sculpting for as long as you can. But if there's a day that you're completely burned out, just like in order for you to continue doing something, although it's something very easy to do, just search for maps, is very useful, you know, because that can define the final look of your scene at the end. So keep that in mind. You guys have any questions? So before I open, let's just like be mindful about like how many questions going to be asking, so other people have a chance to ask as well. And also because the less I'm not interrupted, but obviously, the more I can actually keep, you know, showing more stuff. So, but totally up to you guys. You actually you have the ball in your court now, so go for it. And yeah, feel free at any time to just interrupt me here. And I'm gonna go at the same time, just like start showing some stuff, or think about what you want to ask, and I'm going to start like just showing you some of the stuff that I bypassed in here because I was in a hurry to actually try to get some stuff done. So the first thing here.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
Sorry to
no problem, man.
Talking.
No problem.
So, one quick question.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about the perspective and the camera, focal length and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I wonder, does that change for you in a production setting versus working on your own likenesses for different photos and stuff like that? Things where they might be animated, or you're sending them off for a film or something like that.
Yeah, it definitely does, man. Because like uh, since back in the day, I mean, like when we were doing like the Avengers, the first Avengers, we received like both like scans from light stage, which is basically like
Yeah.
the dome of light, right? And also some scans that actually, for Mark Ruffalo, we had like you saw if you saw the videos for the breakdown of the VFX, we got like scans of his hands and arms and also his
Right.
face, and it's all
Oh,
from the life cast stuff. Um, so we have all this information, and for example, like for the Irishman, like the amount of information we got was pretty huge. It's like a lot of very cool data that was received. Also, like this stuff I'm talking is not even NDAs. All the stuff I can talk about is the stuff that's public. Otherwise, ILM would fire me. But so we receive a ton of information. Everything it's almost like too easy. Obviously, it's not easy because it's hard to actually make something to look realistic. But
right.
I mean, like it's all the scan data, all the it's like the blueprints we received. They all filmed with infrared cameras, so we had no reflections or specular or anything to it's like to distract. So it's like it's easy in a way because you have all the information available to you. Now, my approach here, I mean, like I said yesterday, is always about like this challenge about discovering what's going on with the character, right? Sometimes you find one single picture online, and I was like, how can I give life to this character? And that's the trip for me. So I try to get clues with, it's like in terms of the lenses that are being used by, kind of comparing like size of nose and ears and stuff like that. But a lot of that is left for imagination as well. So it's like it is a little tricky to actually come up with the formula, because even in movies, I mean, like sometimes you get like old movies and they don't have like a description of what lens was used, and we have to kind of like spin around and chase our tails to find out what's the
Right.
yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, I was wondering not so much just about likenesses, because I know, as you said, you get so much scan data and all this
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff that it does a lot of that guesswork for you,
Yeah.
right? But when you're working on still a portrait, but it might be a creature or it
Mm-hmm.
might be something where you're not relying on scan data, I just wonder, when you're sculpting for production, do you still sculpt with a certain perspective and do your back and forth tests with Maya and all that kind of stuff? Like
Uh,
your camera perspective.
yeah, what would happen in this situation would be, for example, like they would provide us with the exact lens that was used to photograph in
Oh, right,
a
right.
light stage, right? And
Yeah.
then basically like even sometimes providing the actual camera position. if
Oh,
not
okay.
if not then we can actually reposition, rotate, and then create like a bunch of different cameras around it. Let's say like 10 different cameras from all kinds of angles, and then
Oh,
it's just a matter of like just matching things, right?
yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's fairly easy because you have the right amounts and right values already.
Yeah, that's must be nice.
Yeah, yeah, but that's the thing, like it's nice and it's very necessary for that kind of environment, but it's not
Right.
creative, right? Like it removes the.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's why I like the challenge of just like trying to come up with stuff.
Yeah, and one comment. Sorry to take up time, but I think what might be the issue with your light in Maya,
Hmm.
with that area light, I wonder if you might have it accidentally scaled -1.
Oh, that's possible.
So
That's
that's why it's
possible.
rotated the wrong way.
Yeah, that's possible. I think you might be right. So let's
Yeah.
try this one here. Let's see the scale here.
Cool. Thank you,
Yeah,
Chris.
look at that. Yep. So the scale is -0. You're right. So let's put like 0.57. Yeah, that's good now. Thanks, man. Yeah, so let's go back here to ZBrush. And again, like you feel free to measure the time, how much we're gonna, you know, uh, but so in terms of this guy here, how I approached it yesterday. So my favorite brush, like I said yesterday, is the clay buildup. But by default, the clay buildup has this 20 for intensity, which is, it's too big, it's too much. creates like this gigantic, kind of like throws people off if they're using ZBrush for the first time, you know. Obviously you can control with the pressure sensitivity, right? And do like less like that, but by default, probably you're gonna get a lot of that. So I normally use like 2 or 3 for intensity, and that becomes much, much better. The reason why I like this brush is because if you try sculpting the same kind of forms I'm gonna be building up here with the standard brush, actually, it doesn't respect like the neighborhood, right? So basically, if you're sculpting with the standard brush, like let's get one in here, and you're sculpting right here, if you try to sculpt around here, you see like it starts actually trying to invade the area. It doesn't respect quite a bit. And then if you switch to the clay build-up, then basically like if I'm sculpting this area here, and I start actually building up this area here, those areas are respected, you know. It's like, it's kind of like you basically like build one form next to the other one. If I do very strongly here so you can see it, it kind of like builds up and creates this little pressure increasing between them, instead of like having something super round in there, right? And also because it's so close to sketching, like with a pencil, right? So normally, if I'm building stuff up, I use this very low intensity to create like very thin layers, as if I was just layering like thin slices of clay. And then I do in multiple directions. So I'm doing like a quick sketch like that, I like to do like very long strokes. So for example, like to get the zygomatic bone in here, get like long strokes like that. You know, it's like if you go like around the masseter in here, I'm gonna be building a masseter, gonna probably like build with longer strokes as well, right? And then I start building things up in the opposite direction after that. So I first establish the bigger planes, the bigger forms, right? And then I can come and cross the opposite direction, almost like drawing. So you're gonna create this little effect, right? It's kind of like a, and then if you don't wanna have this type of like kind of sketchy kind of detail showing up, sometimes it's nice to just plug, instead of like the square, that's the default that comes with the brush, you plug like an alpha, let's say like 35, and then that's gonna create like a very smooth build up. So that's cool if you're like refining, for example, like if you're doing like a creature with lots of organic forms, you know, it's kind of like a blob or something like that, or the muscles very like, you know, so with that, you can actually create very organic forms very easily. So that's basically the setting I use for the clay buildup. And then for the standard is basically what I did yesterday. I cloned the standard brush, and then I added this alpha 39 right here. Then I tweaked my curve in here to create a point. This is almost like a pen upside down. So that's the tip of the pen at the top. So the pointier you go here, obviously you're gonna get more of a carving tool. And then for the stroke, the lazy mouse, my tweak was from 0.25 to 0.02 to prevent the dotted lines that you get. So that one is basically the one I use to carve things, you know, it's like to add like wrinkles and things like that. I'm gonna be using a lot of that to create the micro wrinkles once you're doing like the tertiary forms. So I'm gonna be doing a lot of that. And so I'm gonna start doing some more sculpting around this face here. And as I do it, I'm gonna try to describe what's the process, okay? So what I'm thinking about when I'm doing it. So let's get back my referencing here. Put on the side, and let's do that. So a lot of stuff here is hidden, right? Like you cannot see in there because of the beard, but we're gonna do some exploration in here first. So in terms of form, there are a couple of things happening with the face in there. So let's do a clay build up. Let's see, where's my clay build up? That's the thing, you know, it's like if I have that big, I cannot ever find it. So clay build up, let's go back in here. So this form in here for the nasolabial, the tendency is normally to stop where I stopped right here, right? But there is a little bit more of a form. It's almost like this line here, it continues and wraps around the nose in there. So if I go here and I get just like this line to actually show you what I mean. So if I start drawing here, it's almost like this line continues and creates this shape going around here, right? It can be very, very subtle. Sometimes you're going to see a little bit of a line that's going to be kind of like a little deep in there, right? It's just kind of like a mention of that. You can see a little bit of that right here. So around this area here, he has a little bit of that, right? So that's something that you can keep in mind. Little things like when it comes to the forms themselves, the subtleties is really what makes the character at the end. Obviously, if you're just trying to define the primary and secondary forms first, that's not going to matter that much. But that's the kind of stuff, you know, it's like once you have those in place, your eye is going to have to start getting a little bit smarter in terms of like looking one step ahead. You know, it's like if you're seeing a form that looks quite simple, for example, this looks just like a line that's the basolabial, right? But then there are all those subtle forms, like this little dimple that I mentioned in there, that's in there. This little, you know, it's like this is going to have to build up a little bit more around here. The base of the nose in here, I added this line using the H polish brush that I showed you yesterday, just to show that that's a little bit flatter around there. I did the same for the lips in here, so I flattened it a little bit. I used a little bit of that to define the zygomatic bone in here a little bit more. A lot of that stuff is not even there, and I'm adding here just as a reference for myself. So for example, there's another line I can actually add just as a reference, just like around here. So basically like the zygomatic, instead of like having that simple form, now I start getting a little bit more of a different form, cutting it in there, right? Then I'm gonna have, for example, like instead of like just having a simple line going in here, I'm gonna start looking at the subtle stuff. There is a pull happening here. It's a little bit emaciated, but not much. It's just like, it's revealing a little bit of the zygomatic muscle in there. So for example, like you're gonna have another form, secondary form happening around here, right? That's pulling. Sometimes if you're looking at someone who stylizes a lot and draws stuff, you're gonna see lots of this kind of stuff, you know, kind of like trying to represent the zygomatic connecting, right? Connecting to the corners of the mouth. So you're gonna start seeing stuff like that. But in our case here, everything is gonna be very subtle. We're gonna mark things and then just gotta smooth it out a little bit, just a little touch here and there. We're gonna want to have like some muscle tension and things like that, but it has to be subtle enough so it doesn't obliterate like the expression we want to represent. Corners of the mouth, very important, right? If you're sculpting someone using just like a front reference like this, just like I said before, sometimes you can nail the likeness, because especially using like, you know, blueprints and things like that, and then you start turning around and it stopped working, right? Because the depth of the mouth is not correct, is not you know, deep enough. Very common mistake is this one. For example, if you have your face mask in there, you just get this. So basically like the corners in here, you know, it's like you look from the front, oh yeah, then you start turning around, it's like, oh, it's super flat, right? It doesn't have depth in there. You have to imagine that when you look from the bottom or from the top, there is a muzzle in here. This all this this structure in here has to cover the teeth, right? So we have like layers of muscle in here. You have the teeth underneath everything, and then all those things have to make sense at the end. So you know, it's like it's always like if you're looking at a video of someone sculpting like a real clay sculpture, sometimes they just like make a roll, for example, make the roll flat and just like slap right there at the muzzle to create like this upper area and then the lower area as well, just to have this volume built in there, you know. Even if you remove them quite a bit later on, you have to define those areas, like trying to accommodate what the actual anatomy happen underneath, right? So for example, like if I'm talking about, like I was talking before, the masseter here, right? You're gonna have your jawline. Like if it's a male, probably the jawline is gonna be more squarish. So the angle here is gonna be a little bit more squarish like that. If it's a female, then the angle is gonna be a little bit more elegant, right? Then you're gonna keep going in here, you're gonna have to find that, you know, it's like the volume here. So the masseter is gonna be coming from, oops, from here to here, which is basically like that volume around here, right? And then the masseter is an interesting muscle because actually it covers the kind of like a leg of the temporalis in here. The temporalis is this muscle that goes like in your on the sides of your skull, right? So the temporalis is this large muscle that goes all the way around here. But it's a funny thing because like the zygomatic bone, it starts around here and it has a hole. So if you look from the top, there's basically like a cavity right here. So there's a hole right there. And the temporalis bone go all the way here, all the way to until it connects to the ear in there. And then through that hole, the temporalis muscle goes down and connects to this area here, the front part of the jaw bone. So the jaw bone is actually suspended by the temporalis that starts all the way up there, right? So that's why when you see someone like eating something, right, you see like this muscle here firing, basically like the masseter is being fired in here, but also the temporalis is being fired because it's actually the muscle that's actually responsible for bringing the jaw up, right? Like it's pulling everything up. So yeah, it's very interesting the way that everything is connected in there. So for the ears, first off, like the mass of the cranium, like I said before, let's work on that a little bit. It's another important note here. And this is like, it's one of the most common mistakes I see, like especially like in the review sessions, is that the models sometimes they look great, but it doesn't have enough cranial mass, right? So you see my model from the front in here, from the top, this is completely wrong, right? You see like there's a line, it's almost like a square right now. And this should be much more flared in a way that it looks like an upside down egg. So I'm gonna have to do this, I'm gonna add some more volume in the back, and I'm gonna start pulling this back area here out slightly. And I wanna create like this reversed kind of thing. So I'm gonna bring this area here, the temporalis, a little bit inwards. I'm gonna keep my zygomatic bone a little bit more arched in there because, like I said, we need some space for the muscle to pass through it, right? And then I'm gonna just bring it a little bit out, a little bit more. It's gonna look very weird when I turn the other angle because I'm doing just from the top. But so now is a flat head, right? So I'm gonna be filling this up. I'm gonna bring it up a little bit. I'm gonna bring this down, building up some of that volume in there. Still pretty weird. Let's bring my perspective here. And then I'm gonna bring this out slightly, this in, and then I'm gonna bring this area here a little bit more, top, bring it out. And then with the ear, we're gonna start building a little bit more of that area as well. But at least now we have a little bit more mass in the cranium in there, so it doesn't look so shallow anymore. Something like that. And then if you look at the skull, I have my little skulls here from Anatomy Tools back in the day. I have the female and the male, and they are slightly different, right? And then there is this little, I don't know if you can see here, on the side of the skull, right below your ear, you have like a kind of like a weird bone popping out of that looks like this. So around here, if I have like this line of the zygomatic, if I draw a line from here, kind of like a little bit of an angle. So I'm gonna do this like that. That's gonna meet like the deepest point of the skull. A little bit of an angle. And then from here, you're gonna see something like this. You're gonna find like in any reference you look, you're gonna see this little thing right here. And this is basically like it's called the mastoid process. And the mastoid process is basically like if you have like that muscle on the side of your neck, right, that connects all the way to your clavicle. Actually, it doesn't connect to the clavicle. A part of it connects to the clavicle, but it goes straight to your sternum, actually, at the front. That's the sternocleidomastoids, and that's connected right here. So basically, like, that's where that muscle starts and goes all the way until it connects to your clavicle, right? So around here, it's a great clue for the positioning of the ears, right? So if I have this this process here, is actually a little bit lower, especially if I'm looking here. So I have my jawline around here. I'm gonna make a little bit more square since we're making a male here, right? And then from here, if I look closely, so I'm gonna have my zygomatic. I'm gonna do like a little bit more exaggerated so you can see it right here. Let's just turn on this one. And then it's gonna go all the way here, right? And then it's gonna wrap around the orbital bone in here. This is all part of the same bone, basically. And then when it goes back in here, that's where the, you're gonna have the little cavity here with the two parts of your jaw bone. And then this is exactly the point where you're gonna have the pivot. You're gonna have a little ball in here. So if I just switch back, you're gonna have a little ball right there. And then around here, so that one I put is slightly different position. So that process is gonna be a little bit closer to this. So right around here is basically where you're gonna find your ear canal. So right behind the pivot in there. So you're gonna have your ear canal. So with that in mind, I can start actually sketching an ear here, right? So let's just do it this way. So actually with clay buildup. So you can start sketching something. So for example, we're gonna have this one, that's gonna be my ear. So that means that's gonna be semi-covered by this little lid in here from the ear. And then the ear itself is gonna start there to here. Let me just make it a little stronger. And then you should have an ear fairly in the correct spot. And obviously you can move stuff around, but around here would be kind of like my ear. And then from the side now, I can start actually playing with that. Let's just select this. And I might need some more resolution because it's pretty bad right now. And I'm just gonna use the move brush, sorry. The move brush here. Just gonna pull this out. Being careful so I can pull like this back part a little bit further than the rest, right? So it has to have an angle. Do that. And then this area here is more connected to the rest of the face. So I'm gonna keep it around there. Just gonna pull it around this. And then we can start actually adding more form to it later. But just to have like a overall position of the ear in there. And I might have to add some more volume around here too. And so my head is not completely round in there. And normally what I do, I can actually do this drawing here now of my temporalis line. So I can do something like that. So I'm gonna go around here. And then if I follow this temporalis line all the way towards the back in here, then when I look from the front, it can actually help me to guide what I'm gonna do with it. So this area here goes inwards slightly. This one stays a little bit more like there's a little curve in there. And that one is gonna indicate where I'm gonna start actually creating another little plane here. Again, like for heads, like there are all kinds of different types, right? But I normally like to actually bring this part here right at the connection a little bit lower like that and have a little bit of a breakup and then get a little bit rounder on top and then obviously just build up a little bit more in here. Sometimes you're gonna get like very flat in here. Sometimes some people have like very strong temporalis muscle, right? So it all depends of your reference, obviously. And then this one is gonna end up being like the orbital bone around here. But just to have an idea about, it's like the structure in here. Then from the bottom here, obviously, you're gonna have to put our sternocleidomastoids, like I said, all the other muscles that are gonna come from this area. You can actually just build a little bit of a neck in here just to have something because we're gonna need it eventually. So if I have something like this, and just like my resolution is so bad right now, but it's expected. We're gonna be subdividing and getting more resolution out of it. So again, let's just do the move brush. Let's bring this down and actually expand my selection in here. So it's important, like what I did, was like that slightly curved line to find like the deepest point in there. it's kind of like it's a useful thing to actually start defining, you know, it's like with the position of the neck after that. So, and then here, obviously, we're gonna have to, you know, bring a little bit more of this structure down. Start building a little bit more of a neck in there from the side. From the front, it's probably like shit. Yeah, there you go. And then we're gonna start to have to build up the rest of the form, including the sternocleidomastoids. It's definitely gonna start having more volume from the side, right? But then this is the stuff we're gonna be building up as we go. We're gonna have the trapezius in here eventually. So all this stuff gonna have to be built. But for now, let's keep the dude with a very simple neck, and let's explore some of the other facial structures in here. When it comes like to the eyes themselves, you see like it's very sketched right now. The positioning is not even like in the correct position just yet. It's just like, I tend to make the eyes fairly small most of the time. I think it's a style kind of thing. And you know, it's like sometimes it doesn't get very, especially like when I have someone with glasses like Stan Winston, and then the glasses actually make the eyes super tiny, then it makes the effect even worse. But I also like the weirdness of the, you know, the smaller eyes. It's kind of cool, you know, it's like, it's almost like the characters become a little bit of a creature sometimes. But you see like this area here internally, I don't have any structure in there. Closer to the caruncula, which is this little gland in here, right? The one that is going to connect to the eye later on, to the eyeball in here. So closer to the caruncula, I'm going to have to start defining this area a little bit more. One thing that we do with eyes, when we start drawing eyes, everything we just draw, like I'm going to do like on the forehead in here. So you basically like do like a very round kind of thing, right? Basically like that's the kind of like the simple eye that we normally draw. And then as we start like sculpting more and doing more drawings and stuff, we start paying attention to certain rhythms that are very important. So for example, like if I'm drawing an eye, instead of like doing this, you know, simple like cartoon eye, right? I start doing something that has a little bit more of you know, for example, like if I start in the corner right here, I'm gonna start with a certain like amount of roundness, and probably gonna add a little bit more of a little bit more square on that side, right? It's like more curvature. And then here I'm gonna get a little bit lower, and then I'm gonna go a little bit higher again. I'm gonna get my caruncula in there, and then I'm gonna have this interesting diagonal, you know, it's like this is gonna be, you know, kind of like an angle in here. So we're gonna have those two angles. That normally helps like to create something that looks a little bit more realistic and with more rhythm. And then obviously there's like all those folds. You see my fold is in the wrong spot because I was sculpting from the front. So we're gonna have to do that. So let's explore some of those forms. Go back here. Let's see. So use the forehead as a, the first thing I'm gonna say is that it's important, obviously, often to go like from the bottom, for example, and you start looking at what's going on. If you look from the bottom, there's a lot of wrong stuff, right? Like the eyes in here, for example, like they are bulging out a lot in here, but then I don't have enough filling in there. So for example, like the eyes, I don't have eyeballs yet, right? It's very hard to know what's gonna happen in there once I have eyeballs. So I think a natural step is for us to add like a temporary model in there. So for us to be able to decipher this area here. So we can do this very quickly. Let's do like we'll go to subtool, and we can just do append, and then append this sphere in here. Let's go to this guy. Let's see where this sphere, oops, this guy. Let's see where the sphere is. It's right there. The size we're gonna be talking about later. Oops, oh, I flattened it. We're going to be talking about the size of the eyeballs in relation to the face, but that's going to be more towards like when we're really working on the eyeballs, so we can actually nail it. But for now, I'm just going to make like an approximation in here. So we're going to do something around this. Might be a little bit big, but you can always turn on the transparency, right? So you can actually see a little bit of that. And I'm just gonna do like an approximate version of it. So normally, like another common mistake is to actually have the eyes placed right in the middle, right? And then you have like this weird thing that happens with the angle. So it's always good to have the top eyelid covering most of it, right? And it's almost like you need this almost like 45-degree if you start from here to, not 45, it's less than that, but you need an angle in there to make sure that it reads as something more realistic. So I'm just gonna put the eye slightly on the top. Remember that the eye is enclosured by the orbital bone in there. And then the orbital bone goes all the way up here, right? So that's why basically the eyeball is centered right there in that hole. So when you look at the eye with the eyelids and everything, it doesn't look like it, but yeah, it's pretty much like right in the middle of that hole. So now that we have a sphere in here, which might be a little bit big, not sure, we're gonna have to measure later. So I'm gonna put it in here, I'm gonna bring it out because it seems like his eyes are a little bit bulgy in my reference. So now I have that. What I can do, I can actually duplicate it right here. And then I can actually, in the duplicate, I can just go to deformation and then mirror it. And then you can go again to select the top one and you can just say merge and then merge down. So now I have the two eyeballs in the single subtool in there. And now with that, at least I can actually know how deep I have to go with stuff in here and how I can start actually echoing the form of the eyeball to the rest of this stuff. So for example, you saw it was just a sketch, right? So everything is a little bit out of place. And as we go further and further with more details, we're gonna be actually making sure that all of this stuff wraps around the eye. So actually, you can believe that there is something pressing the skin and creating that bulge up, right, for the bottom lids and the top lids. And for this area here, I can just like press Alt, and then with the move brush, I can just like make sure that everything goes inside of it. Alt actually works just to move in the normal direction, right? So you create like a constraint to the normal direction. So that's why I use Alt a lot, actually. That way you don't need to be like right in front of it. You can go and move stuff on the side, right? By using Alt, it just like goes towards the normals. So it's useful. So for this area here, the top eyelids, you're gonna have a little bit more of, you need some volume in there, right? You need that little shadow that's gonna be created between the top eyelid and the eyeball itself. Gonna make sure that, again, like the eye lids are echoing the form of the eyeball. And then later I can actually, refine this, make sure that there's a little bit of a flat surface in there and everything. But for now, we are just gonna make sure that things are fairly in a good spot to start actually improving the sculpture a little bit, because I cannot go and start like reprojecting to a topology at this point just yet. I have to refine this model a little bit before I can project anything. And then from here, you can tell that this is the kind of like detail, it's like this line that's created in here. It comes with age, right? I don't remember having this line for a long time. And then all of a sudden I look at my face now and I do have it. So this line here basically like comes from the middle over here. Sometimes you have multiple. And then it creates this little fold, right? And actually connects kind of towards the center in there. And then the eyelid itself in here, depending on the person, obviously, but I can actually continue the eyelid to create this form. And then either you're gonna have a little bit more of that fold following that structure and then hanging from here at the same time, or it can be something that's more like it's a completely reveal of the top eyelid. That can happen as well. It's like people are so different, it's like you're gonna find all kinds of variations for those areas. And then right here, I'm gonna have to build a little bit of, it's like a little bulge right at the end in here. Basically where it ends, kind of like covering the caruncula area. I'm probably gonna have to expand this cavity here just slightly. again, it's going to depend of like person to person, right? Like how much this is going to be big. Some people have like large carunculus. Some people have very small ones. My wife has a small carunculus. And what happens with that is that I noticed this when I was sculpting her portrait, is that it makes her eyes look a little bit wall-eyed, you know, kind of like because the carunculus is so short, it looks like the eyes are looking in different directions slightly. And it's not. I look at her eyes. If I actually add a little bit more caruncula, like in Photoshop or something, it's completely normal. You know, it's just like a tiny little slight thing that happened in there, and it's just because the carunculus are very tiny. You know, it's kind of interesting. It kind of like changes the center of the eye in general, the way you observe the eye, just by having like a smaller carunculus. Very interesting thing, like accidental discovery. So let's do this. Bring a little bit more out. And here, I'm gonna add a little depth around this whole area. And sometimes you're gonna get a little bit more of a little bit more pronounced with this little line. Sometimes you're gonna get more, sometimes you're gonna get less. Nose also gonna come like in all kinds of shapes and forms. Sometimes you're gonna get a little bit more of a division in the middle, right? You're gonna create like that little cartilage reveal in there. That's gonna extend all the way down there, right? Sometimes it's very visible, sometimes it's not at all. If you watch the Irishman, like wasn't Bob, was what's his name, man? I forgot. The little guy.
Joe Pesci.
Joe Pesci. Joe Pesci has very, very split, you know, cartilage in here. It's kind of interesting. Like he has this little nose in there. But in this case, I think my reference doesn't have it. For the lips, when I'm sculpting it, one thing I tend to do is to create this line that's kind of artificially, which is basically like sculpting something like this. I add an additional line right here. That's the contour of it. And another one right here. We're definitely going to have something like that, but not that exaggerated. But I'd rather add it and then just like slowly just remove it, you know, so I can kind of like start like removing some of it. But I like having it because it describes for me where the lips are ending and where this area of transition is happening. So around here, for example, if I start like smoothing it out, I can tell that that extra lip in here on top is actually happening right there. And then if you're sculpting the lips, there's another thing, like just like I was saying with this this kind of like a very subtle form that happens around here, right? That I mentioned that creates, I'm building up a little bit more here, creates that little indentation in there. The same thing happens with areas like, you know, the chin that I mentioned, like the 3 forms instead of like a single form. Like you're gonna get like muscles coming from the side and then building up this side area here, and then a little bit more in the middle as well. And then depending on the facial expression, right? Like if he has a little bit more of a tense kind of facial expression, you're probably gonna get some of those dimples created in there, right? Like creating a little bit more of a tension, like he's actually, you know, contracting. Probably the master would be a little bit more contracted as well, a little pressed, right? And then for the lips themselves, just like with those forms that are all like in 3s like that, for the lips, you're gonna have 3 forms at the top of the lip. So you're gonna have like this little guy right in the middle. Some people are gonna have bigger, some people are gonna have smaller, and then 2 extra ones on the sides, right? So you're gonna get a little bit more of a forming here. So you're gonna have like basically, like if I make it very strongly, like 3 little pillows, right? So you're gonna have 1 little pillow in here, 1 in the center, and then when it comes to the bottom lips, it's gonna be only 2. So you're gonna have a split in the middle. And then this is gonna describe where the 2 ones gonna be, right? So just by adding this kind of stuff, instead of like seeing everything as a simple form, if you start incorporating this kind of stuff, breaking up the form, you know, it's like you know, creating 3 forms at the top, 2 forms in the bottom, describing the edge of the lips and things like that, you start adding a little bit more structure and making things a little bit more believable. But obviously, depending on the character, we're gonna have to eliminate some of the forms we just added or incorporate even more, right? Then we're gonna have like forms like the corners of the lips in here. You see, they are very flat right now. It's very important to actually create a nice transition between what you see in here in terms of how much form you have, like with those little pillows, and how much this is going to be dug in. Because right now you see it's a very kind of flat kind of thing. So if I add more depth in here, I can actually build up some more after that, but I need to make sure that the lips actually fade into enough depth in here to read as something that it's believable. So let's use this guy here. Just dig in a little bit. Create a little dimple in here, and then I can start filling up the sides. Now here, the same thing, you know, it's like if you have this little dimple in here, this little dimple is gonna extend up slightly, like that. And then you're gonna have another form that's gonna be created in here, which is gonna describe that little dimple. So everything is about like how the forms interact with each other, you know? It's like if you have the slightly hard line here for the edge of the lips, that's basically gonna create an echo around here that's gonna describe this little dimple. And everything is like, it's part of like a system, right? Like everything has to interact with everything. And then when you start observing those things, you find lots of interesting surprises. If you have a facial expression, for example, like someone is grumpy, right? Like you have like a frown here, you probably like this muscle here, you're gonna start seeing more like a, let me do like a cartoon version here. You're gonna get a little bit more of a, you know, everything goes down. You're gonna have like an echo of the whole thing going down. So the corner is gonna go down, right? And then you're gonna get like a little bit more of a, you know, it's like things being pulled down around this area here. You're gonna get kind of like a bulldog kind of face, right? So everything is like dependent of everything else. So if a form goes up, you have to understand that there's something else that's gonna be pulled with that form as well, and everywhere, right? So every time you're sculpting a form, just thinking about the neighbor form, what's going on with it, you know, it's like how that form is pressing the other one. Even the lips in here, you see like there's no interaction between the lips just yet, because we're just like early on with the sketch. But then later on, we can start imagining, okay, so there is a pressure being produced in here between the lower lip and the top lip. So I'm probably gonna get like a micro bulge being created in there, you know. Things like that, you know. It's like there's a if you want to see like a master of like this type of interaction between like masses and things, just look at Bernini's sculptures, you know. And you're gonna see like how the guy was able to create like tension and softness in hard marble, you know. That's pretty genius. So yeah, it's very great inspiration always to look at Bernini's stuff. So for the whole muzzle here, like I said before, I mean, like this whole area, depending on your character, you see like a lot of stuff I'm doing here, I'm just imagining right now. I'm not looking at the reference at all. But you can start actually adding more and more volume depending of how your model looks like. In this case here, I believe that he has a little bit more volume around this area because he has to talk to the muzzle on the top in here. And then around here, sometimes you're gonna get a little bit of a dimple underneath in there. You're probably gonna get a little bit of, you know, a little form right here. Oh, I'm running out of resolution. Let me just use a little Sculptris Pro. Let's see if I can get a little bit more around there. Okay, let's turn it off now. So, you know, so this form here as well, same thing. You can keep going with it. So this one is probably going to collide with this bottom one here. That's the part of the chin, part of those three pieces of the chin that I mentioned before. So from here, you're going to start like seeing some of those forms being revealed, like the zygomatic muscles. Going to connect like from the, going to come all from the corner of the zygomatic bone right here, and they tend to connect straight to the corner of the mouth, right? And then you're going to have like some other ones coming from here. So it basically, like, I think they're like three or four pieces that basically connect from. There's a bunch of different muscles in there, but those are the ones you see the most. And I just realized I'm not using my my square alpha. I like to have like those little lines so I can actually see the direction of everything. And then in terms of the overall shape of the face, you're gonna get all kinds of different types of faces. You're gonna find out sometimes the face is gonna be pretty flat, right? Sometimes you're gonna find out that the muzzle is much more pronounced. The flatness of this whole area here of the orbital bone is very interesting as well. At least like in the examples I was looking today. For example, like when I saw the European version, the white man, the orbital bone was going deeper. So basically like the eyes were setting a little bit deeper. And then when I saw both the Asian skull and the African skull, the Asian is the flattest one. And then the African, it looked a little bit flat as well, but not as flat as the Asian one for sure. So that's why I kind of like kept this area here fairly flat. So the eyes are bulging a little bit, but in terms of the cavity itself, it's a little bit more flat than I would sculpt in general, like for like a white character, right? But in terms of the corner of the eye, you see how flat they look in here? It's gonna be good if I can actually pull the corner back slightly, because I want to make sure that this is wrapping around enough from the bottom like that. And then I can see that it's like this whole bone area here looks very weird. So I'm going to start bringing this back slightly to help with the echo from the eyes in there. And then build a little bit more volume here as well, especially around here, because this became just very cartoony. So I'm going to just build 3 volumes instead of just 2. So I'm going to add a little bit more volume in the middle, incorporate a little bit more here. And then this whole area you're going to have to revisit eventually and just get a little bit more interesting. From the bottom here, I can tell that this angle here looks a little bit too much. So I can actually bring this eye bag here a little bit more towards the center, and this outer part more towards the center as well, and try to make a little bit more, coherent with the eyeball itself. So slowly we start drag. That's the thing I was mentioning yesterday. And I was like, I do everything kind of like primary and secondary at the same time, because I'm so comfortable with the fact that we can actually go back and forth in resolution at some point. Once this is projected to the base mesh, I can just like go to the lowest resolution, fix all my primary forms, go to a second level or third level, work on my secondary, go all the way to HD, work on my tertiary, and keep doing this forever. As long as you do carefully, you can keep going with this, like, and do a lot of fixes. That's why I don't go for like, okay, let's make the primary forms perfect. No, I just want to go for it and have fun and build things up. But I understand that if you are not completely comfortable with the facial anatomy and stuff, then it might be a little challenging if you don't structure everything correctly first, But I kind of like, I'd rather make things messy first and then we start like cleaning up the mess because I'm a little bit anxious about finding the character, So I kind of like, I want to see the character popping out as soon as possible. And sometimes it's very frustrating because it doesn't come up till late in the game, But you guys have any questions about the stuff I'm talking about?
Actually, with what character that happened to you that you have done?
Which was that?
What character you had trouble of the ones that you have done on the course? Which one it was the hardest for you?
I would say all of them. I mean, like, yeah, I'm not the best at likeness at all. It's like I chase my tail a lot, and I think like every single one of them has a set of challenges. It's like with my wife, obviously, the divorce was the challenge, right? or like poisoning my food or things like that can be pretty bad. So no, it's actually like if it's someone you love, right? Like it's hard to sculpt, and especially like a woman, they, it's like they're so sensitive about like taking care of their bodies, taking care of, it's like the makeup and all this stuff. Like they're actually raised, conditioned to that, which is kind of like, I tell her all the time, you're naturally beautiful, you know, so you don't need to worry about that stuff. But you know, it's like that's their own trip, you know, it's like to worry about stuff. And but then with Stan Winston, I mean, like it's an iconic figure, you know. It's like I really love the work that the guy did. He was well respected in the field. So like trying to do something cool, you know, and at the same time having this deadline that's like only a month to do something, it's a little bit. I could definitely use another 2 weeks at least for each one of those characters, you know. And what happened with every single one of my characters, I simply abandoned them because I have to start a new class and teach people stuff, you know. It's like, and that's my trip these days, to actually get people to, you know, learn this stuff and post their progress. And I feel so proud, you know. It's like, it obviously helps my business as well when I see people posting really cool work, you know. But it's just like it's more out of pride, I'm gonna say, you know. It's like I feel really proud. And I mentioned this before in a previous class that I'm not gonna have a much longer career in this industry, you know. It's like like being like 32 movies now for the past 15 years. And you know, I've just turned 48 and thinking about other stuff in life, you know. It's like and probably like being trapped in like in a production environment, and everything is so technical, you know, without having a lot of the fun that we used to have when we didn't have a job in the industry. I kind of like I orbit more towards those classes these days because it makes me happier overall, you know. But obviously, I love my job, and as long as they keep giving me like you know, cool work to do, I'm definitely going to be doing it. And I don't know for how long it's going to last, but at the same time, it's going to be very cool to see once I'm not doing this professionally anymore, you know, in the industry, to see other people like producing amazing stuff, and if I can have a little bit of part of that, you know, it's like helping in any way. It's gonna be very cool to be an old man and just like, oh, see that guy? He used to be my my student. Yeah, so out of pride to tell my kids, I guess.
I have one question related to the profile.
Mm-hmm.
How do you tackle the neck area and that area that you don't see that is actually covered by shadow, right?
Uh-huh.
Because I feel like a lot of my characters are missing a good profile,
Uh-huh.
and when you mix the neck with the lower jaw,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting to see how you break up the jawline and why. And
Yeah, I mean, like, if I'm working on an older guy, I'm probably gonna get away with a lot of stuff, right? But this guy here is probably not that old, so I'm probably gonna start with creating a line that's gonna define this area here. It's basically like I'm gonna create two lines. This first one, and then the second one is gonna define the lower part of the jawline. So if you create those two lines, I think you can start like flattening things just as a reference. So if I use like an age polish here, so I can just flatten this area. And you start with an angle a little bit like that, you know. So I have a jawline and I have that line defining it. And now from this point on, bring it back in here. And then obviously I'm gonna have to add some more resolution here. So let's try with labeled up, and then this guy. Let's just add some more resolution. I definitely need some in there. Even with the smoothing here is gonna be good. Now there's a lot going on in here, right? Like I think the first things I would do is basically like define those two lines, and then you start like really going for the sternocleidomastoid. So basically like what I mentioned before, right before behind the ear here was that little process. So if I start my mastoids in there and I start adding that volume in a very diagonal way, this is going to basically connect to your sternum. So it's going to pass through the clavicle in there and go towards the sternum. And then around here, I'm going to define another two lines. Let's see. Just like a little messy right now. Let's, if I build a little bit more of the trapezius here, might help me. So let's just isolate this first. Let's keep it a little bit isolated. Select and then move it around. And then we can start remodeling. You can go like as far as, you know, bring all the way out and then just go to smooth to get some topology in there. Obviously, I'm not gonna go for a super strong guy. So I'm gonna just build up some of the trapezius in the back. And then lower this entire area. Otherwise it's gonna get like super strong and I don't want that. Then from here, let's just go and try to build up this area a little bit more. As low as I can actually get to the clavicle. Remove some of this volume here and then start defining zygomatic. So let's try to do this. Carve it all the way to the front. Bring it forward. And then obviously I'm gonna mark it pretty good here, but then you know, I'm gonna probably smooth it out quite a lot because I don't want the guy to be like a bodybuilder or anything. Oops, it looks like terrible from the front. Just bring it towards that. Let's carve, dig in here a little bit more. And I'm gonna increase my intensity too. It's looking pretty bad. At some point, I'd rather turn off my, if I have enough geometry to start doing some sculpting, turn off the Sculptris Pro. Otherwise it keeps like subdividing, it gets very, very slow. So what I'm gonna do here, so I had my first line at the top, I have the second one in here. I'm gonna add like a third one, a little bit more straight around here. This line, I'm gonna soften a little bit. And I'm gonna blend a little bit more towards here. And then there's another one that's gonna happen. So for example, if I go even lower here to where approximately where my clavicle would be, I need to go lower with this because the neck's gonna be too chunky and I need to be a little bit more like a little older guy, not so strong. So now I can start actually smoothing this a little bit, that area as well. And then I'm gonna have to find another volume in here. Define first this first volume, and then I'm probably gonna find later, you know, it's like gonna have to find where the Adam's apple we're gonna be. Around there. But basically like it's a couple of volumes, like I would say like this main volume here in the front, that's gonna create this triangle. It's gonna get deeper around here, closer to the sternum. And then the sternocleidomastoid is gonna come in here, is gonna wrap and go around the clavicle. And then it's gonna connect to the sternum. And then there's another arm of it that's basically like if there's a connection in here, the other one probably gonna come around here. It's almost like a little split that happens with it and connects to the clavicle. So you're gonna have like probably like two of those. And then here, I mean, like sometimes depending on the tension, you can get some stuff a little bit like showing more than others, you know. But I think like for the neck, it's kind of like that's the way I kind of approach. You know, it's like I define the sternocleidomastoids first, and then I try to search for those other volumes later. But it normally, yeah, it's kind of like I would say like what, like one volume in here. So it has to be filled up a little bit. Then a second one around here. Then I have like this guy right there. And then the mastoids and everything else is kind of like it starts building up around those things. But that's kind of like landmarks, I would say. And from the top, all this stuff, of course, has to be corrected. You see, like I don't have enough volume for my trapezius in here, and it's almost like a bow and arrow. When you see from the top, you have like this interesting shapes for the clavicle. You know, it kind of comes forward a little bit and then goes back and becomes like kind of like a triangle in there on the sides. But yeah, it's just once I have a little bit more geometry in there, and a little bit before I start projecting this stuff, I'm probably gonna build this in a nicer way, but that's just like a little quick approach in there just to show, you know.
Oh, thank you, man.
Yeah, no problem. So I don't know how we're doing with time. Let's see. Oh, it's 11:09. Okay, so for today, I think that's basically it. Like in terms of the things I wanted to talk about, like my approach for those things is mostly like, I don't know if you got that, but I'm not gonna say like a philosophical approach, but it's kind of like a trying to incorporate like a thought into everything you do when it comes like to how the forms are interacting with the next one. You know, try not to imagine like that the forms are isolated by themselves. Imagine that that's the whole face is like it's a super complex rig, right? So all the muscles are connected to different things. There are tendons, muscles, and everything is pulling, right? Like from all kinds of directions. And if you look at the facial anatomy and the muscles in the face, everything has a function. You know, it's like for each one of the facial expressions, you're going to have like a set of muscles pulling in different directions. And as you pull, the fold is going to be created because there is a shock, you know, between one form and the other form being triggered. And you know, it's like as an example, for example, if you have something like the direction of the fibers of the muscles around the muzzle area, for example, right? If you look at the anatomy book, everything is a circle like that, right? You get all those circles like that. And as a consequence, when you see like the wrinkles being created around it, they go in the opposite direction, right? You see wrinkles like that as you get older, right? They kind of like, they counter that direction of the fibers of the muscle. Same thing is going to be around the eyeballs, right? So for example, you have like your orbital stuff, like the muscles are all circular like that, right? As a consequence, you're going to get wrinkles going that way, right? So yeah, it's kind of like always thinking about like what's causing what you're seeing. The thing that fascinates me the most when it comes to anatomy is not like the 0% fat that I make fun of. You know, it's like 0% fat Wolverines, you know, posted. It's the surface of the anatomy. You know, it's like that's the stuff that I think is more interesting because it's dependent on the not only the muscles but everything that's underneath. And as you age, let me show you this. For example, like facial fat pads. For example, like if you search for something like this, you're gonna end up like with you know, search results like this, for example. Let's see. I think this is a good one actually. So you see this, for example, like those are the fat pads when you're young, right? Like they are all against each other and everything covers all those muscles. So it makes no sense to sculpt the muscles super visible, right? Because you know it's a young face and everything is covered with this very soft tissue in there. Now, as you age, all those fat pads, they start shrinking, right? And then as they start shrinking, you start revealing the bony landmarks. Then you see an older person, you're going to see like, okay, the orbital bone here is very, very visible, right? And all of a sudden, like you're going to start seeing like the zygomatic bone, like really pronounced around here, and the zygomatic muscle in there too, right? Everything's going to start, actually, you're going to reveal more like an anatomy figure when you get older than anything else. But what fascinates me is what creates everything, right? Like the combination of all those things, how the, you know, we're going to be talking about skin tomorrow, probably start talking about it. And, you know, it's like for an older person, you know, when you're a young person, you have your pores very visible, right? Like if you're a female, probably like your pores are a little bit more subtle, but males normally have like very visible pores. I have like very, very visible pores. And then as you age, those pores, they almost like, they lose the elasticity. So they become more shallow. It's not like they go away, but they kind of disappear. You know, it's like, it's almost like that little depth is kind of like raised, and all of a sudden, like they're very, very shallow pores. And then it becomes more like a combination of how the old skin breaks up and becomes drier and loses the elasticity. And everything becomes more about like micro wrinkles than pores themselves. So you're going to see, for example, we're going to show some pictures tomorrow about like examples of like very old people over 80, 85, 90. And you're still going to see pores around the muzzle area, around the nose area. But most of the pores that we normally sculpt for younger people in the cheeks area, right? They're gonna be kind of gone. You're gonna see lots of micro wrinkles and things like that. That's why it feels a little out of place when you have like a model posted that's like a very old person, not like a 60-year-old, but like a very old person with lots of pores very visible. Your brain kind of knows that doesn't look right. You know, you're expecting to see like a very fragile, drier skin than something that looks very, you know, it's like an orange peel, you know. So yeah, we're gonna be talking about that stuff tomorrow, and I'm gonna keep going a little bit further with my sculpture here, so I can have some more to show, and eventually gonna be reprojecting stuff. I'm actually glad that you guys got a little bit of that tutorial about the you know, how to render stuff, like basic steps in Arnold, so at least you're not stuck. So if you're doing any sculpture right now, if you have any sculpture you did in the past you want to use for this class, make sure you know, do some renders. Feel free to post as well, and you know, just so you can have a feel of how the model looks like as a physical piece. You know, I hope you guys are enjoying. I'm enjoying as usual, and I see you guys tomorrow. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you,
See ya.
very welcome,
Hey.
guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good
Bye,
night.
guys. Someone posted Baby Yoda. That's Antonio. Baby Yoda. Thanks, guys.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.